The wind howled across Oak Island as Rick Lagina stood at the edge of a centuries-old mystery. His weathered hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of what lay before him. For hundreds of years, this cursed island had fiercely protected its secrets. It had swallowed the fortunes of treasure hunters, crushed dreams, and left behind nothing but whispers. But today felt different. Today, the island was ready to give up what it had hidden for over 700 years. Deep below Rick's feet, something ancient stirred in the shadows. Something long forgotten, sealed behind layers of stone and time, now ready to be revealed. Rick didn't know it yet, but he was standing on the brink of a discovery that would change everything. Not just the history of Oak Island, but history itself. The greatest secret of the Knights Templar was about to see the light of day for the first time since 1307. Before we dive into what Rick uncovered behind that ancient barrier, take a second to like and subscribe, because what you're about to witness may just be the discovery of a lifetime. Nearly 140 feet beneath the windswept surface, the drill struck something strange. It wasn't fractured stone or loose soil. It was smooth, unnaturally smooth. A perfectly flat slab, fitted with such precision it couldn't have been shaped by any natural force. The crew fell silent. Rick stepped forward, brushing away the damp earth with his gloved hands, his breath fogging in the cold. What they uncovered wasn't a geological anomaly. It was deliberate. The shape, the texture, it all spoke of human intent. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed what their instincts were already screaming. Behind the slab stretched a rectangular void, a hidden chamber, an empty space where none should exist. On the monitors, the readouts painted a picture of something unmistakably artificial, something waiting to be found. "It looks like a room," Marty murmured. Rick responded quietly, "Not a room." A doorway. Tests came back quickly. Traces of iron embedded in the stone pointed to what could only be man-made hinges. The faint signature of blacksmith work, centuries old, still clung to the stone. Rick's thoughts raced back to the mysterious stone triangle discovered on the island in the 1800s, long dismissed as a coincidence. But what if that triangle wasn't just a curiosity? What if it was a compass? One that pointed directly here? The team exchanged looks. No words were needed. They all felt it. The metaphorical door, mentioned in old legends and dusty journals, wasn't a metaphor at all. It was real. An intentionally engineered gateway, hidden for generations and waiting to be discovered. The legends, it turned out, ran even deeper than they'd imagined. Long before European explorers arrived, Micmac oral traditions spoke of a sleeping gate buried beneath the island, sealed by elemental forces, guarded by spirits of fire and water. Elders had warned that disturbing it would bring both fortune and curse. Those warnings echoed in Rick's mind as he stood at the threshold. This wasn't just local folklore. In the fragile pages of the 17th century French explorer journals, written in faded ink, one line had always stood out: a door of stone, sealed with oil and blood. Scholars had once dismissed it as superstition, but now, just inches away, stood a slab that fit that description perfectly. Rick and Marty pored over their notes, drawing connections to medieval practices, how relics and sacred artifacts were hidden beneath fortified chapels, protected not by armies, but by symbols and stone. Could Oak Island have been their sanctuary, their final archive? They remembered the strange reports over the years, flickering lights over the swamp, strange shadows near the money pit. Many had called them ghost stories. But now, looking at the door, the truth seemed far more profound. These weren't hauntings, they were guardians. The realization hit the crew all at once. Oak Island was never just a trap to keep treasure hunters out. It was a vault, designed to keep something else in. And now, the door was opening. It had been built with careful intention, a ceremonial fusion of faith, science, and secrecy. This wasn't just a slab of stone. It was a message encoded in architecture, a riddle carved into the earth. The final confirmation came in the markings themselves. Upon close inspection, the stone revealed concentric circles etched with incredible precision, stars aligned with purpose, and crosses repeated in a calculated pattern. These weren't random scratches or the work of idle hands. This was mathematics, something designed. Experts were called in to analyze the carvings, and what they uncovered was nothing short of stunning. These symbols weren't decorative. They resembled a cipher wheel, a mechanical code similar to those rumored to have been used by the Knights Templar to safeguard their most protected vaults between the 12th and 14th centuries. As Rick examined the alignment more closely, something stopped him cold. The carvings matched the arrangement of the night sky in the year 1307, the exact year the Templars were betrayed and forced to scatter across Europe. Was it a coincidence? Or was it a timestamp, etched in stone to mark the moment their greatest secret fled westward? The resemblance to the architecture of Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland was impossible to ignore. Arches, stars, and crosses laid out with the same kind of geometric precision. It was as if history itself was whispering across time, through stone, across oceans. After weeks of reconstruction and analysis, the team came to a breathtaking realization. These weren't just symbolic carvings to interpret. They were part of a functioning mechanism. A primitive locking system had been built directly into the slab. It wasn't simply a door. It was a coded gateway, hidden beneath Oak Island for over 700 years. Understanding the mechanics was just the beginning. LIDAR scans swept over the stone, peeling away centuries of dirt and sediment in digital layers. What they saw silenced the entire team. This was no accidental barrier. The slab had been engineered with gear-like teeth that interlocked perfectly with the surrounding bedrock. Even the most skeptical voices could no longer deny it. This was deliberate construction, purpose-built architecture, hidden beneath mud, salt water, and time. Further scans revealed hinge points reinforced with metal that, when tested, didn't match anything native to Nova Scotia. The alloy was identical to that used by Iberian forgers in medieval Spain, a region where the Knights Templar were known to have thrived before their dramatic fall. Still skeptical, Marty speculated that perhaps a colonial-era engineer had come later and buried something here. But that theory quickly fell apart. Radiocarbon dating from oak timber, found sealed behind the slab, revealed a timeline between 1290 and 1310, precisely the years when the Templar Order was forced into hiding. The evidence was undeniable. This wasn't the work of pirates or settlers. This was a medieval structure, buried long before Columbus ever set sail for the Americas. Hydraulic simulations were run to test the slab's weight, over 20 tons. No medieval tools or technology should have been able to move or place something so massive with this level of accuracy. And yet, here it was. A structure designed to resist water, gravity, and time itself. Rick ran his hand across the carvings once more, feeling the centuries beneath his fingertips. Then he said what everyone was already thinking. This wasn't a trap. This was a door, concealed with purpose, crafted with knowledge, and waiting for history to catch up to it. Then came the moment of truth. Drills finally pierced the slab's edge, and the result was immediate. A sharp hiss filled the air, compressed air escaping with a force that sounded almost alive, like the final breath of a long silent giant. The chamber behind had been sealed so perfectly that even its atmosphere had been preserved. The stale air smelled of metal and old oils, faint traces of pitch, cedar, and something more unsettling. Gas sensors blinked to life, detecting high levels of mercury vapor. Historians were quick to note, the Knights Templar had been known to use mercury, not only to preserve sacred relics, but also to poison and deter would-be intruders. What lay behind that slab was more than treasure. It was a carefully protected secret. A vault built not just to store history, but to shield it. The air inside was thick with warning, a toxic veil daring them to turn back. But Rick held the team steady. His voice was calm, even reassuring, but underneath it was the weight of centuries. Whatever lay within hadn't been designed to be found. It had been built to endure, to stay sealed forever. Rick reminded them. They were intruding on something sacred, something locked away by those who believed their oaths were stronger than life itself. Still, the drillers pressed on. The slab groaned as fractures spread like spiderwebs across its surface. Dust swirled in the beams of their lamps, mixing with the stale air, until finally a chunk broke free. Through the small gap, they glimpsed it. A darkness blacker than night. Not simply the absence of light, but the weight of something ancient and waiting. From inside, they retrieved a splintered oak beam. Lab analysis dated it squarely between 1290 and 1310, the precise window when the Knights Templar vanished from their strongholds across Europe. Their treasure fleets lost, their records erased. The link was undeniable. What disappeared on one continent may have reappeared beneath this remote island in the North Atlantic. Then, with one final push, the slab shifted loose. It slid against its interlocking stone teeth, and the void opened wide. After centuries of silence, the gateway had finally given way. Crossing the threshold was like stepping into another world. The first breath inside was thick and suffocating. Torchlight spilled across smooth stone walls, faintly glistening with age. The surfaces had been coated with lime, an ancient technique used in Mediterranean architecture to repel water. But it had never been seen in North America from this era. Whoever built this chamber had known how to fight the ocean itself. On the walls, faded red pigments appeared like ghosts, solar discs, crescent moons, and a glowing seven-pointed star. Rick recognized them immediately. Their geometry matched the esoteric seal of Solomon, a symbol often tied to mystical protection and forbidden knowledge. Wooden scaffolding lined the narrow passage ahead. The timber beams were fitted with expertly crafted joinery, advanced mortise and tenon cuts that no colonial-era craftsman would have known, let alone mastered. This wasn't the work of desperate men burying stolen gold. It was the work of an organized order, working with precision and purpose. Each beam whispered of a larger vision. This wasn't just a vault. It was a sanctuary, a monument carved in darkness. Then came the scent, subtle but unmistakable. Not the damp rot of buried earth, but something else entirely. Resin, incense, tar, and cedar oil clung faintly to the air, and beneath it all, a sweeter note, like the remains of something once burned in ceremony. The chamber hadn't simply been constructed. It had been consecrated. As the torchlight flickered through the tunnel, the smell curled through the smoke like memory. The men knew then. They weren't standing in just a tunnel. They had entered a sacred space, guarded by symbols, sealed behind impossible stone, and built with reverence. As they moved deeper, the tunnel opened suddenly into a dome-shaped chamber. Immediately, the acoustics changed. Every shuffle of their boots, every whispered breath echoed and multiplied across the curved walls. A single sound became a chorus. This space wasn't built for silence. It was engineered to carry voices, to amplify sound, maybe for prayer, maybe for oaths, or perhaps for chants that once bound this place in ritual. Rick raised his lamp and scanned the walls. There, along the edges, were shallow alcoves, carefully cut niches in the stone. Once, these would have held objects of deep meaning. Now, only fragments remained. Rusted daggers with crumbling blades, chain links blackened by time, pottery shards with the faintest traces of paint. None of it whole, yet none of it random. These were offerings, deliberate deposits, signposts left behind by a culture determined to be remembered. Soil samples told the rest of the story. The earth beneath their feet was laced with ash. Thick layers of carbonized remains had blended into the very floor. Later analysis would reveal burned wood, bone fragments, and oils unknown to this region. The chamber had been lit by fire, likely not once, but many times over. This was ritual burning, not to destroy, but to sanctify. The flames had scorched more than just stone. They had left their mark on the air itself. This wasn't just a hidden room. It was a sacred vault, a place of ceremony, secrecy, and protection, designed to outlast the centuries and speak, when ready, to those who dared to listen. There was a weight in the air, a heaviness that seemed to cling to every flicker of torchlight dancing against the curved dome above. At the very center of the chamber stood a raised dais, slightly elevated from the floor. It wasn't decorative, far from it. Its design was mathematically precise, cut with intention. Shallow grooves spiraled outward from its center, as though something had once been meant to align perfectly atop it. It spoke of weight, of balance, of pressure. Rick knelt and ran his fingers along the fine channels etched into the stone. This wasn't an altar, not in a religious sense. It was part of a mechanism, a piece of something far greater and far more complex. Then, one of the crew tapped the dais gently with a metal rod. The sound that followed echoed through the chamber, a deep, resonant boom that came not from the stone itself, but from beneath it. Hollow, subterranean. It confirmed what many had started to suspect. The chamber wasn't just a room. It was sitting atop another hidden cavity. Something deeper, sealed behind the mystery of this perfectly engineered platform. The secret began to reveal itself through patience and sharp observation. Beneath the dust and centuries of debris, the floor gave up more clues. Interlocked stone panels emerged, fitted so tightly against one another they initially appeared seamless. But under closer inspection, faint patterns were visible. They formed a labyrinthine design, each line intersecting like a riddle etched in stone. Rick crouched again, tracing the subtle wear marks left in the grooves, evidence that these panels weren't fixed in place. They had shifted over time, ever so slightly, under the weight of centuries. This was no static floor. It was designed to move, to react, if the correct pressure was applied in the right way. It was a mechanism. The resemblance to known Templar engineering was unmistakable. In Portugal, similar mechanisms had been documented, puzzle-like trapdoors hidden beneath chapels, staircases revealed only when certain stones were pressed in a precise order. That same genius, that same meticulous secrecy, had made its way across the ocean to Oak Island. And now, the team stood at its edge. Recognizing the system didn't make it any less dangerous. The crew paused, debating the next step. Marty was cautious. He warned that triggering the wrong sequence could collapse the entire chamber. If the structure wasn't meant to shift freely, forcing it could bury them all alive. But Rick disagreed. He argued that the very precision of the design was proof of its purpose. It wasn't meant to kill those who understood it. It was meant to protect against those who didn't. With care, the team laid timbers across the platform, distributing their weight evenly over the pressure points. Every step was calculated, every movement discussed. They adjusted and realigned with painstaking precision, until the moment came. A deep groan rolled through the chamber. Dust fell from the dome overhead as one section of the floor slid backward with mechanical grace, like a massive stone drawer retracting into darkness. Torchlight spilled into the gap, revealing a stairway, hand-carved, descending deeper into the earth. A cold rush of air flowed upward, sharp and fresh, like the buried breath of the island itself escaping after centuries. Step by step they descended. The staircase narrowed, guiding them into a smaller, tighter passage. At its end stood something both breathtaking and intimidating, a barrier that radiated purpose. A heavy oak door stood before them, its surface darkened and sealed tight with pitch that still gleamed after hundreds of years. Thick iron bands reinforced it, with crossbars spanning its width. This wasn't just a door. It was a fortress wall, condensed into a single threshold. But it wasn't just the construction that told the story. It was the detail. On the iron hinges, the unmistakable symbol, a double cross. The same design carved into countless Templar gravestones across France. It was their mark, their identity, their claim. And now, it was stamped directly onto the final gateway of Oak Island's deepest secret. Above the door, carved into the stone lintel, were words in Latin, etched with solemnity and permanence, Solus Fidelis Transit Indignus. The translation hit hard. Only the faithful may pass. The unworthy shall perish. The warning stopped them for a moment. A silence fell over the team as they absorbed its meaning. But Rick never faltered. His resolve remained firm. Whatever lay beyond that door, they were ready to face it. Rick reminded the team that Oak Island had never truly been about gold or forgotten relics. Every artifact they'd unearthed, every buried chamber, every cryptic clue, they all pointed to a much deeper purpose. This wasn't about wealth, it was about guardianship, about protecting something far greater than treasure, something that demanded loyalty, secrecy, and sacrifice. And now, standing in a narrow stairwell before a massive iron-bound door, they weren't just opening a vault, they were crossing the threshold into the very heart of the Guardian's design. The door towered in front of them, a test of faith forged in oak and iron, sealed in silence for hundreds of years. Then, the plasma cutters sparked to life. Blue flame bit into the thick crossbars, each strike sending a tremor through the chamber. The air filled with the sharp scent of burning metal, and with every cut, it felt like they were breaking more than iron. They were violating a silence that had lasted for generations. The last crossbar shrieked as it gave way, crashing to the floor in a scatter of glowing sparks. But even then, the door resisted. Thick, tar-like pitch sealed its edges, centuries-old resin that had held firm through storms, floods, and time. Heated blades sliced into it, and then came a loud crack, like bone snapping under pressure. The seal was broken. A rush of stale air escaped the chamber, but it wasn't foul. It carried the faint aroma of cedar, dry and sweet, as if incense had been burning in the dark. The scent alone told them what they needed to know. Whatever was inside had been preserved intentionally, protected with knowledge and purpose. The door groaned open. Its ancient hinges protested with every inch, until the gap widened enough for floodlights to push through the darkness. What the light revealed stopped everyone cold. Stone shelves had been carved directly into the chamber's walls, aligned with careful symmetry. On them sat rows of vessels, bronze, clay, and stone. Iron-strapped chests, reliquaries shaped like miniature shrines, and containers so precisely placed that it was clear. Nothing here was random. This was not a treasure room. It was an archive. Light glinted off polished gold, coins spilling from open boxes, hammered ingots reflecting in sharp corners, chalices capturing the light like mirrors. The sheer scale was overwhelming. Not just the wealth, but the intention behind it. Every item had been placed, not hidden, curated, catalogued by hands long gone. The team stood motionless, not just stunned by the gleam of precious metals, but by the weight of what had been preserved. They moved carefully, beginning to document what would become one of the most significant archaeological finds in recorded history. The first items they identified were golden reliquaries, carved with astonishing detail and inlaid with sapphires, rubies, and pearls. Their craftsmanship suggested they once held relics of immense spiritual power, bone fragments, splinters of the true cross, or the remains of saints. Their presence implied something remarkable: that Oak Island had served as a sanctuary for holy objects spirited away during the Templar Purge. Lining the lower shelves were stacks of gold ingots, each one bearing mint marks, not from England or Spain, but medieval Portugal. The stamped symbols matched dates from the 12th and 13th centuries, aligning precisely with the period of Templar naval expansion. Individually, each ingot was priceless, but together, their historical importance eclipsed their monetary value by far. In one corner, wooden crates housed sealed scroll tubes, their wax caps still intact after centuries. One had cracked slightly open, revealing a tightly rolled parchment inside. If the ink had survived, these could be Templar codices, shipping logs, internal charters, or perhaps even directives meant to survive the collapse of the Order. The possibility that such documents had been smuggled across the Atlantic and preserved was staggering. It would be irrefutable proof that the Templar network had extended much farther than most historians ever dared to believe. Near the scrolls lay ceremonial swords, their hilts embedded with gems, and chalices fashioned from pure silver, rimmed in emeralds. These weren't weapons of war, nor everyday objects. They were regalia, ritual items used in sacred rites and secret ceremonies. Their placement here confirmed the final truth. This chamber wasn't built for storage. It wasn't made for commerce. It was a sanctuary. A sacred archive designed not only to preserve objects, but to protect a legacy. A legacy the Templars had hidden not just from enemies, but from time itself. This was no ordinary treasure. What lay before them was sacred wealth, a treasury designed to serve both faith and secrecy. Preliminary estimates valued the contents of the chamber at over $90 million, but even that staggering figure felt irrelevant. Its true value wasn't monetary. It was historical, cultural, spiritual. These were relics of a lost Christendom, objects that blurred the line between myth and reality. For historians, it was a revelation. For generations of treasure hunters, it was the culmination of centuries of hope, obsession, and pursuit. But even as the team stood awestruck in the chamber, new data began to surface. Scanning equipment had started mapping the surrounding stone, and anomalies appeared on the monitors, subtle shifts in density, gaps where there should have been solid rock. There were more cavities beyond the chamber. They weren't just cracks or natural formations. They were sealed, structured, deliberate. The outlines suggested not a minor extension, but something much larger. Adjacent vaults, possibly an entire warren of connected chambers, lying dormant beneath the surface, waiting in silence. Then, something even more intriguing came to light. On the far wall, partially obscured, was the outline of another entrance. This one dwarfed the iron-bound oak door they had just passed through. The chiseling, though ancient, was unmistakably clear. This doorway had been built on a different scale, more monumental, more significant. While the current chamber had been arranged with curated order, like a sacred treasury, this second entrance hinted at something else entirely. A vast archive, a repository of knowledge. Rick examined the markings, silent at first, then spoke with calm certainty. This wasn't a simple treasure hoard. It was an underground system, an exiled order's last attempt to preserve not just wealth, but wisdom, faith, secrets meant to survive the collapse of their world. What they had uncovered might only be a fraction of a much greater whole, one that stretched beyond Nova Scotia, possibly connected to other hidden sites across oceans, mirrored in other lands, protected by the same silence that had shielded this place for centuries. The idea was staggering. If Oak Island wasn't just a hiding place for valuables, but a key node in a forgotten global network, an underground archive of a suppressed brotherhood, then its implications would ripple across the entire field of history. It would mean the Templars hadn't just vanished. They had gone underground, preserving their legacy in secret chambers across the world, guarded by design, hidden from time. And Oak Island was one of those sanctuaries. As the crew prepared to leave the vault, their footsteps echoed through the chamber. The sound bounced across the curved dome, multiplying in strange, haunting patterns. It felt less like sound and more like a whisper, a reminder. Oak Island never gives up its secrets all at once. It tests you, demands patience, commitment, and above all, reverence. What they had opened today was not the end of the mystery. It was only the beginning. Because beneath this island, buried in the dark, lies a truth powerful enough to reshape everything we thought we knew about medieval history, and the reach of the Knights Templar, who may have crossed the Atlantic long before Columbus ever set sail.